Look, I get it. We all knee deep in summertime shy right now, but hey, winter is coming. I'm talking about the cold, the wind, the frost, the polar vortex. And you definitely want to make sure the windows on your crib hold up. That's where Window Nation comes in. This month, get 50% off all window styles. Window Nation offers a lifetime warranty on all their windows, so you can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future. Schedule a fast, free estimate now with Window Nation. Call 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com. You remember that amazing little cafe you discovered last summer or that perfect hiking spot you heard about? Well, with the Overlook mobile app, you can create personal lists of places you've been, want to go, and always see everything on a map. Share your favorite hidden gems with friends and family. Or, keep your secret spots private for you. The best part, no ads cluttering your list and no one selling your interests or travel data. All you got to do is download the free app at overlookmaps.com and check out overlookmaps.com/Chicago to see some of our personal favorite CityCast lists on a map and in your pocket. Overlookmaps.com. Collect and share the places that matter to you. Today on CityCast Chicago, during the summer, our favorite farmers markets are all over the city. Home gardens are in full swing, and local chefs are really leaning into promoting local seasonal ingredients. All of this got us thinking about Chicago's farm-to-table restaurants and larger scene, and I didn't even realize how many spots are actually farm-to-fork. It's Wednesday, August 6th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. From The Infatuation, we've got Adrienne Kane in the building. Adrienne, welcome back.
Hello, Jacoby. Thanks for having me.
Always good to have you with us. We've also got John Ringer in the building. John, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me again. It's great to be back.
So first, I want to start off with the question, what exactly is farm to table? When a restaurant says they're farm to table, farm to fork, what do they mean?
I think the biggest, broadest brush is kind of just this emphasis on sourcing from, local purveyors and local farms and bringing that over to restaurants. And I think kind of this emphasis on knowing where your food is coming from and supporting small businesses within the area, that's kind of been the big focus on farm to table recently, I think.
I was going to say, I agree. It's not, I think a long time ago, it was more about the type of food. You might expect more produce driven, sort of seasonal Midwestern kind of menu. But I think now it's broader than that. It's that even restaurants that don't have menus that reflect that are still showing where they're sourcing their ingredients from.
For me, when I would think farm to table coming up, I would immediately think produce, vegetables, but it feels like that definition also is local brewers, where people are getting their meat from. When we're thinking how broad that category is, what kind of things are we that are on our plate or in a restaurant can be considered under the farm to table category?
Even John, you and I were talking about mushrooms, right? What's a recent restaurant that you went to where it was telling you where they're getting their mushrooms from? And it wasn't a traditional sort of American Midwestern type restaurant.
I don't remember specifically what type of mushroom it was. Maybe it was a maitake or maybe a lion's mane mushroom. But yeah, I think it's no longer just, about produce necessarily. Eggs and pork and beef are all under this category of being locally sourced.
Or even just bread. I was also looking at Big Jones. I know it they tell you where they're getting their stuff milled from, or where they get their grits from, and it's all on their menu.
Speaking of bread, I also think of Floreal Bakery and Cafe in Lincoln Park. They get their flour from this local Illinois spot, Janie's Mill, and I think it's not as reductive as just fresh vegetables,
So when you say the difference between a farm to table restaurant
and one that isn't at this point, is that different than simply someone who has a relationship with a local farm or a local butcher? And is it more about the restaurants that advertise or make clear where they're getting their ingredients from? Or is it kind of a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. And I think that like you can really tell the difference between, just like anything else. It's like, does the fact that you're just telling us where you bought your produce from actually make a difference on my plate? Does it actually say something about you as a restaurant? And it's not always the case, you know, and there are some places that are not loud and proud about it. But like Lula Cafe in Logan Square is a really good example of a restaurant that's been like touting farm to table since before that was like a buzzword phrase, right? Since I think they opened in 1998. And if you go on their menu, it doesn't say anything about that. But if you go on their website and you click around, you'll see that they have a list of all of the organizations, all of the farms, all of the places that they have relationships with. So it just feels like it's a really big part of their ideology, you know, beyond just like where they're buying lettuce from. You know, not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, I like to know, hey, when was my lettuce born? What's its social security number? Like, all of that is like fun to know. You know, then there's a restaurant like Daisy's that I believe it's a very produce driven Midwestern sort of influenced menu. And I know that their big farm to table relationship is the chef's, I think, brother has a farm. And I think that that's a lovely thing to know. You know, does it make a big difference in the food? I love their food. Maybe it does.
I do too.
You know?
I just had the lamb stracci like, 2 weeks ago, and it was still bomb. It was maybe my fourth time having it.
Yeah, it's such a good restaurant, you know, and I think I like to know that it's, you know, a farm that's down the road, so to speak. But we are in Chicago, which means we are surrounded by a lot of farms. So what does it really mean? You know, I mean, anyone can kind of say, you know, what's local? I don't know. It's kind of, it's an interesting question.
John, how would you describe the overall farm to table restaurant scene in Chicago?
I think like it's kind of, you know, maybe like early on in like the 2010s, like farm to table kind of maybe meant literally more like farmhouse chic, or like here's like an Amish chicken on a plate and, you know, like some carrots that were just like plucked, you know, yesterday. But I think now it's kind of like farm to table is just whatever is like taken, you know, from like a locally sourced spot. Like I'm thinking of like the spot Maxwell's Trading in the Loop, which has like their own rooftop garden. You know, that's like how much more local can you get when you're just plucking it from your roof, you know? So I think, and they're not just like serving, you know, just like a roasted chicken. They have these more complicated like Singaporean chili crab and like this Thai curry sweet potato, you know, like there's all of these more very like intricate recipes that are using these very, very hyper local ingredients. I think we've kind of, you know, really transcended the whole like, oh, let's go hang out in a place with like wooden rafters and a bunch of like rooster tchotchkes, you know?
You're so right. I was actually thinking Homestead on the Roof is similar, right? Where they have a garden on the roof. That's where they get a lot of their herbs and vegetables from. And it's a Portuguese restaurant, right? Like I'm not going there just to be like, where's my broccoli? I don't know. I'm obsessed with this idea of persona. Like, you know, what are my broccoli's hopes and dreams? You know, how was its truck ride over here? I need to know. It's like... And that is much more, I think, about that localization, you know, versus this idea of, I think when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to just people wanting to know where things come from, I think it's really cool to be like, oh, it came from, you know, one story up on our roof.
And doing that without sacrificing, as John would say, intricacy or culture or whatever the case may be. You mentioned Lula Cafe, been open since the late 90s, where you say it's looked at as one of Chicago's stalwarts, OGs in the farm to table movement, even if they don't really shout that from the rooftop. Are there other restaurants for you all that maybe you didn't realize was farm to table, but is still doing that work of not only building those relationships, but explaining it to the customer?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of them would be North Pond, which is kind of another kind of like it's a fancier restaurant. It's in Lincoln Park, and that is another restaurant that is very much about locally owned, like nearby farms. And that's one of those places that I kind of tend to forget about because it's been around for such a long time. It's just kind of holding it down, and it's a special occasion restaurant. But when I was like looking around, I was like, oh yeah, that's something that they're really dedicated to, and they have been from the beginning.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I just was thinking about this yesterday because I was getting brunch there. But I was at Middlebrow yesterday. And I was like, oh, it's just like a pizza spot. But then it's like you dig a little bit deeper, and then like, on their website, they're talking about like we locally source a bunch of our stuff from like Michigan and Indiana. And I'm like, wow, this tomato in this sandwich is pretty awesome because it's like so fresh, And I think like they also, take it like a step further past just the food because like they are making their own wine from, these grapes from Michigan. And so I think that's a different, thing on the table that is not food related, but it is still part of this larger concept.
Is there anybody else who's doing good beer, good wine, beverages that are also considered farm to table in a way?
It's not necessarily limited to just like beer and wine. I think you're now finding a lot of like cocktail bars, a lot of higher end restaurants where like sourcing produce for their syrups and for, all of their garnishes for their drinks. So I feel that it's no longer just limited to like I want to say like ready packaged or ready made drinks, but like these, you take the idea of having recipes for food and you just like move it over to recipes for cocktails, and it's like the same type of concept.
That's true. Like Maxwell's Trading, because it's not all or nothing, right? I think that's another thing that's different about the concept, where it's not like a complete philosophy. A place like Maxwell's Trading, where they are using some of the herbs from their garden to make some of the garnishes and those complex syrups for their cocktails. I think that that's a really good example.
Yeah, I was also like thinking about, Atelier is currently, in the process of moving from their old Lincoln Square location to their newer one. But that is another restaurant where there was a strong emphasis on kind of like its Midwestern sourcing from its wines. Like I remember I had a wine there that was like from Michigan. And then they were talking about how their cocktails were using these syrups made out of fruits that were just like plucked, that week and things like that.
Then there are some places. Okay, this was another one that surprised me, actually. All right, which was because this place is part of the like tchotchke club, where it's like, oh look, a rooster, okay, and it's like it's the rather obviously named Farm Bar, which is like a part of like several different restaurants, and I was actually just like, oh, you know what? Those effers really are farm to table because they get all their stuff from like one farm that I think they own or they have some kind of relationship with, right? Which I guess begs the other question, which is like some of these are more about celebrating other, I mean, this just kind of
Brown Dog Farm.
Yes, exactly. And I was like, who would have thunk it? I thought they were just like, let's get some gingham and throw it on the wall. But it's, it's real. It's a farm. It's from a farm going right to my table. Brown Dog Farm. There you go.
It's funny because when you go to their website, Farm Bars, it says it straight up there, true farm to table experience in the heart of Chicago. And then they kind of walk you through it, show you a video of the farm out in Wisconsin and everything. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, all right. They've got the receipts. I believe you. I believe you, Farm Bar.
You're going to want to bring your tissues for this fascinating theater pick. Come From Away is at Paramount Theater in Aurora. The show is based on a true story, y'all, of a small town in Newfoundland that took in nearly, get this, 7,000 stranded passengers from over 100 countries after planes were grounded because of the 9/11 attacks. 38 of those planes, international flights, landed in Gander, the town that welcomed the world. Nominated for 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical and Best Original Score, the Chicago area premiere offers a simple message that kindness can and should reach across all borders. Experience the small town generosity. Come From Away runs August 20th through October 12th in downtown Aurora. Don't wait. Get your tickets today at ParamountAurora.com. All right, so I want to name a couple qualities. I want you to think if they apply to you, and just maybe I might got your next career move. Ready? I bet. Do you have a passion for people? You're excited to help others and you got great customer service skills. Do you crave flexibility, right? You want to be in charge of your own schedule and chart your own course. Do you got that hustle in you, right? Are you ready to turn that drive into something meaningful? All right, if you answer yes, then hey, real estate might be your next big move. Realtors help people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives, buying or selling a home, and no 2 days are the same. It's a chance to grow a business, make an impact, and build the lifestyle you're working towards. Visit realtorsrealestateschool.com to set up a free career consultation.
Do y'all have a favorite place for dinner?
It's been around longer, but Publican still hits. And like their menu is still, like, if you just look online, it's still very much, we'll kind of divide it up and say like which farm stuff is being sourced from in like the salad or in the meat.
And actually totally on Publican and all of the Publican and Company, right? The Avex and the Publican and the PQMs, because I think that they've been doing it for so long that now, like, I'm not even moved when I see Schlegel Farms on a menu. I'm like, oh yeah, that's been, I know what that is. And I know what that is because Publican's been bringing them up for 15 years,
One of my favorite would be Eden.
In Avondale. And they have like their greenhouse, where they're growing everything too.
I couldn't tell you if I was paying attention to that when I went to the restaurant. I was just like there to get a good meal. But as I was looking through some of the spots that I had been through, that was one that jumped out to me immediately. And when you go to their website, they kind of talk a lot about their focus on seasonal flavors and their goal to constantly be bringing in the freshest ingredients. Why do you think a chef would choose to have a farm to table concept?
I think because they really love ingredients. I think a lot of really good chefs love working with great ingredients. They love working with fresh ingredients. I think they love working with seasonal stuff. And I think that there's like a level of joy if you go to a certain kind of restaurant and you'll hear them talking about, oh, these just came in this morning. And they're actually really excited about giving you those mushrooms or that tomato or whatever.
I think also maybe like part of the reason why chefs might want to open one is I think people are starting, like home cooks are also starting to lean into the seasonality of everything. I mean, like there's this rise of like farmers markets like blowing up. We even have like a farmers market guide on the site, and like everybody and their mother is trying to pick ramps off of the street, I think it's like a mix of both the chef's desires, to like feature said ingredients, but also I think to kind of meet the consumer where they are in their kind of like, food journey themselves.
During ramp season, it's like every restaurant's like these ramps, they fell off a truck. Like we found these ramps on the way to work, like have this ramp cocktail, have this, ramp pizza, everything.
I was going to ask, are these two things feeding each other? Because it feels like the rise of farm to table, the rise of farmers market are happening next to each other. Are they directly kind of feeding one another's growth?
I think that there's just like a heightened level of transparency, I think, for a lot of different reasons. And I think that that's what feeds into this, is just this idea that consumers, especially with social media, with the rise of home cook, with the rise of like cooking shows, like consumers are just much more in the restaurant's business than they ever have been before. Then you also alternatively have this like just these different conversations around sustainability, around all of those kinds of things. I think that all of that plays a factor into why these two things are rising at the same time.
That's a very good point. I think when I think of restaurant shows in particular, I think about the ways shows have revealed how much restaurants have prepackaged meats and are just boiling fish in a bag, how many things are not really cooked with a lot of care, but are just sort of on the factory line of menu to your table. And as much as I can imagine that has brought extra pressure to restaurants, I do appreciate that. It seems, as you were saying, the consequence of that is we are getting a little more transparency.
Yeah, and I think that you just have this idea. I mean, yeah, let's not get I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's like I
Hmm.
know as a consumer, I would much rather spend my hard-earned money on something that I know came from like a farm down the road than like from a delivery truck from some factory. You know what I mean? Like it's just the sense of like that makes just a lot, it's more appealing to me as a consumer. And I think that that's something that restaurants recognize as well, which is that people appreciate that. You know, you can say something is house made and you find out that it came from Cisco and they just like added a little extra sugar in it. And then it's like, oh, we made this from scratch. It's like, no, not really, you know?
Were there any other restaurants, cafes, brunch spots, places you all want to put us on?
I think like what I like about Cellar Door too is that because everything is so like hyper seasonal, hyper local, is the menu changes very, very frequently. So it's like you could go 1 week and have a very completely different menu compared to what it was the last time. Cellar Door is great. Definitely also another one that like I sometimes will like forget about, and then like I'll go and I'll be like, oh, why do I keep forgetting about this spot?
Sausage stuffed smoked quail and purple shiso. Broccolini with summer fennel, conserva, and sourdough ajo blanco. Salt roasted golden beets with fermented beet brine and hemp seed puree.
Kobe's got Google
Man.
again.
You all said menu, and I said jump right into it. Let me see what they got going. Pickled Parisian carrots with turnips and green strawberries. But $6, that ain't bad.
I do think, you know, in the Midwest, it's just sort of, I think there is a bit of a higher bar when a restaurant is going to start touting this label, you know, because truly, like, not to be like facetious, but we literally are surrounded by farms, you know. So I think there's this level of like, what do you really mean when you say that, you know, versus maybe with a city that's less and quite literally in the middle of farm country, right? Personally, I would say that if a restaurant is truly trying to set itself apart rather than just, you know, in its menu telling me, oh, this is from Kilgus, you know, dairy farm, I think you kind of need to highlight this idea of a relationship with these farms, you know, whether or not that's something that is being presented to you when you enter into the restaurant, whether that's something on the website, but just this idea that these are you have a relationship, you're getting more than just one thing. It's just not something on the menu to add a little bit of flavor to it to like let the consumer think that you really care, right?
Yeah. And I think like another sign is like similar to what I was talking about with Cellar Door is, you know, produce goes through ebbs and flows. And so if the menu is like staying the same all the time, it kind of shows that there is like this discrepancy, right? The menu has to kind of reflect what is happening in the produce season, you know, at that time.
Yeah, like it has to have, I mean, I don't want to get too meta about it, but a bit of a consequence, right? Like you don't get to have, you know, or at least own up to like, yeah, these strawberries were grown down the road, but you know, these months we're getting our strawberries from wherever.
Like one thing I think about is when there was like a huge egg shortage, it was this burst of like restaurants starting to use quail eggs as like
As a substitute.
yeah, as a substitute. And so I think it's that kind of with itness with, you know, the farm industry and kind of the seasons that truly can reflect how quote unquote like farm to table a spot is.
Yeah. You in some ways need to see the real world implications playing out on your menus and on your table and seeing people adjust around those things and be creative.
For sure.
And I think that's what is really like fun about these kinds of things is when there's that creativity, like John was talking about with like Maxwell's Trading, where it's like you get to really see the restaurant get clever with its menus. And I still see that from like places like the Public and even like stalwarts that have been around for a long time, and their menus do respond to whatever is happening seasonally or with local farms. And you feel connected to what you're eating when you go into a place like that and you see that reflected in the menu.
Are you all in like your own personal lives? I know you spend a lot of time in Chicago restaurants, but have you all adopted some more like farm to table practices in your own life? Like going to the farmer's market a little more, building a relationship with your local grocers in any way?
So I will say, like, we are really big on getting our meat from, it's called Homestead Meats out of Evanston. And it's one of those spots where, like, literally they're like, we have a cow. We have a cow that we're, like, selling meat from. And if you want to get, like, a tenderloin, it's going to come from this cow. And there's a limited amount of these that you're going to get. And we love getting whenever we decide to cook a special meal at home, we love going there, and like, which is like, we're dancing dangerously close to this idea of like, what were this cow's hopes and dreams, which I don't want to think too much about. A little too familiar with it, but I think it just makes you, whether or not you're actually taking the time to think about it, I think on some level you're just sort of like realizing a little bit more about what you're cooking and what that means, and also it's delicious. I love that place.
Yeah, I mean, it's like for me, outside of like, going to the Glenwood Farmers Market, which is very close to me, my parents still grow their own like peppers and their own like bitter melon and tomatoes. And so it's like anytime I can like go hang out at their place and they're cooking, I'm like, all right, I know this is going to be fresh, because they were the ones in charge of making that,
It also reminds you of like what real stuff looks like, where it's not grown in this like I'm just, we're like, oh, that's right. That's the size of an actual, strawberry or whatever it is.
Do y'all have any other restaurants on y'all list that y'all want us to add to our growing farm to table list?
So I have one that I actually haven't been to, but one of my friends told me about it this past weekend. It's actually in West Woodlawn. Let's Eat to Live. They also have another spot before that, the Foodie Spot, but they grow their own like food in their own garden, and they have like a mix of like Senegalese food, Jamaican beef patties. But one of my friends put me onto that this weekend. I was like, wow, this is crazy, because I'm about to talk about this farm to table, podcast. So this is perfect.
Another one that I know works with some local farms and local grocers is in Woodlawn as well, is 7323 Cafe. The homie Q making some great food out of essentially a restaurant inside of a shipping containers. I want to give a huge thank y'all for coming through, teaching me a little bit of something about Chicago's farm to fork scene, and giving us a bunch of new restaurants to try out. From The Infatuation, our friends John Ringer. Thank you for making time for us, John.
Thank you so much for having me again, Jacoby. It's always fun chatting with you guys.
And Adrienne Kane, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's always a blast chatting with you.
If you want to see a map of the spots we mentioned today, you'll find a link in our show notes. We made the map with Overlook, where you can also find our other list of Chicago spots to check out. Of course, we can't close the door without some good news. Tonight, join Bill Chicago and Austin Eats on the West Side for Movie at the Farm. There'll be a documentary showing Bike Vessel. They'll have garden tours, s'more station, health screenings, even a raffle to win a brand new Schwinn Cruiser bike. I'm also drop a link for that in the show notes. Please be back here bright and early tomorrow, or, whenever the hell you listen, because we're going to be in the building. I'll talk to you then. Peace.